Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of Entrepreneurship Matters. My name is Alicia Wilson. I'm Vice President for Economic Development for Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Health System. And it is my pleasure to host Entrepreneurship Matters this week with two amazing owners of art galleries. First time we've ever had art gallery owners on. And so it is an honor to have Selma Siddique and Myrtis Bedolla come on screen. I'm going to have them come on screen right now, and I'm going to give you their bios, which is not going to do justice to who they are. But you'll get to hear from them during this conversation. We know that successful entrepreneurs, successful businesses do not start in a day. It takes a lot of hard work, multiple failures, and a long-term commitment to have it happen. And these two women are no different here today. Let me introduce them to you, although I think I'm presenting them because I think many people know them. They're famous. Let me first start with Selma Siddique. She is the founder of Fin Soul Gallery. Their mission is to create diverse, welcoming arts landscapes by leveraging and promoting the talents of underrepresented artists. They aim to make art more affordable and accessible. I appreciate you, Selma. But by offering a unique collection of ethnic-inspired artwork and bridging the gap in a world that lacks diversity and positive images from communities of color. Their portfolio is carefully curated from local and international rising and mid-career artists who skillfully create the art of weaving notions of culture, heritage, and identity. Fin Soul Gallery has been in business since 2017, primarily selling online at art fairs around the Washington, D.C. area, and their brick and mortar gallery in Baltimore that has been operating until the outbreak of COVID-19. So we'll talk about that too. Fin Soul Gallery has been present at every event sponsored by the One Journey Festival, including their annual summer festival at the National Cathedral and holiday markets at the World Bank. Selma comes with a professional background, working over a decade in international and humanitarian development organization. She holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from George Washington University and an MBA from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. She also received an honors achievement in Spanish culture and language at the University of Granada, Spain. Welcome, Selma. So glad to have you on Entrepreneurship Matters.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure, our pleasure. Next, let me introduce to some Myrtis Bedolla of Gallery Myrtis Fine Art and Advisory. Myrtis is the owner and founding director of Gallery Myrtis, an emerging blue chip gallery and art advisory specializing in 20th and 21st century American art with a focus on work created by African American artists. Bedolla possesses over 30 years of experience as a curator, gallerist, and art consultant. Established in 2006, the 2000s were that was a great time period. Both of you started in that. The mission of the gallery is to utilize the visual arts to raise awareness for artists who deserve recognition for their contributions in artistically portraying our cultural, social, historical, and political landscapes. The gallery made its international debut in 2019 during the 13th Havana Biennial in Havana, Cuba. For the gallery's second international appearance, Myrtis curated the exhibition, The Afrofuturist Manifesto, Blackness Reimagined, currently featured at the 59th Biennale in Venice, Italy, on view until November 2022. It's a reason to go to Italy to see this. In June 2020, she gained national press in the New York Times article, Black Gallerists Press Forward Despite a Market That Holds Them Back, and authored Why My Blackness Is Not a Threat to Your Whiteness. She is critically acclaimed, as you can imagine, and holds a business administration degree from the University of Maryland, received her curatorial training at the Maryland Institute College of Art, and number of certificates from the world over, including from Berlin, Germany. Myrtis, pleasure to have you on Entrepreneurship Matters. So excited for this conversation today.
Yes, I thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, thank you. So let's jump right into the conversation because Um, After giving those bios, people clearly want to hear what you have to say. So let's start with, why did you choose to be entrepreneurs? And I'd love to blend into that question, which we pose at the outset of every interview. Why art galleries? Because it is such a unique, and we've never had anyone on. And so you two are in many ways just representations of things that we haven't had on this show and many people have never known about. So why art gallery? So I want to start this with Selma and then Myrtis.
Sure. So, I mean, if you had asked me 10 years ago, if you were going to be an entrepreneur one day, I would have answered no. I never imagined myself to be in this position. However, I mean, I come from a very traditional family. My parents are immigrants. My father came to the United States in the late 1950s. And in the 80s and 90s, he worked overseas in the Middle East and Africa, where he was working for international organizations. So that's where I grew up. In the late 1990s, there was a lot of political unrest in Sudan. That's where my parents are originally from. And we decided to relocate to the United States. So, immigrant families, they put a lot of emphasis on education. They wanted all of their kids to go to college, get a few higher degrees, work for a employer, pay the bills, and have a comfortable, decent quality of life. But for me personally, just having lived in America my adult years, you come to realize there's a lot of opportunity in this country, right? There's more to it than just working a job. Yeah. And I think especially in the last 10 years or so, I noticed there's a lot of younger people who are becoming entrepreneurs, and especially, people of color, people from different backgrounds. And that's why storytelling is very important, right? When I hear that somebody else is starting a business and they're doing well, it just inspires you to kind of also think of what you can contribute. Yeah. So I remember I came across this article that stated over 92% of artwork in American institutions and galleries and museums were actually produced by Caucasian men. And I thought that was a staggering figure, 92%. So, I was quite puzzled, and I questioned, like, are we not a creative community? Do we not have talent? Why is that the case? Or is it a problem of representation and access? So I looked at my own heritage. I am a Nubian Sudanese American. So my family is from northern Sudan. As you may know, Sudan borders Egypt. So the area of northern Sudan and southern Egypt is where the Nubian civilization started. And actually, Sudan has over 300 pyramids. And coincidentally, actually, this week, Google Culture and Arts is spotlighting the Merowe pyramids in northern Sudan. So do check it out. So yeah, looking back at my own heritage, I know I come from a very colorful and a very rich tradition. And Nubian women, if anything, are known for their high beauty standards, right? Whether it was physically, how they dressed, how they adorned themselves with jewelry, the body art of henna, the facial scars that kind of, showed their tribal affiliations. But more than that, what most people don't know is that Nubian women were actually the ones in charge of decorating the homes. So if you actually visit the area of southern Egypt and northern Sudan, you'll see that a lot of the homes, the exteriors of the homes are actually painted by the women, and all of the intricate designs and the motifs in the archways and the doorways and the entrances especially, those they give particular attention to, are decorated by the women. And even if that role is, delegated to some of the men to help out with the labor, they're still supervised by the women. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously apart from the furnishing of the interior of the home, the courtyards, all of that. So, there was proof there that we are a very artistic community. So I wanted to kind of bridge the gap and give a space for rising and mid-career artists. But I also asked myself two important questions, two key questions, which was, one of them, what problem do I want to solve? And secondly, what am I good at? Mm-hmm. So the problem that I identified was obviously the gap and the issue with representation and giving a space for communities of color to show their talents. But also, what am I good at? At the time, I was working for a nonprofit where I was the only person running the operations management department. So I was basically running the entire business for the organization apart from the program side. So I thought to myself, if I have that skill set to do this for an employer, why can't I leverage that skill for my personal use and start a business? And so I combined these two skills, my love for the culture and the arts, and also connecting Africa with America. Because what is American history without Africa, right?
I love it. I love how you positioned it. I love how you told us the why in your entrepreneurship journey, because it's so powerful and so important to lift up. The two questions you put up: what is the problem you want to solve, and what am I good at? Beautifully stated. And I know many people watching are probably sitting in your same position. Maybe they didn't read the article you read, but clearly that won't be the case after you're done. So you are solving a problem. Huge. Bravo to you for what you've done. Myrtis, how about you? What inspires you to want to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I think it was, well, I'm definitely certain that it was my grandfather who inspired my entrepreneurial approach to business. He was an entrepreneur. He owned a janitorial service and also a delivery business. I believe he was FedEx and UPS before they existed. So my summers were spent in Aurora, Illinois. I grew up in Chicago, but both my parents worked. So my mom would send us to my grandparents during the summer. And during those summers, I spent with my grandfather. He cleaned businesses, office buildings, the movie theater, and a candy store. He delivered groceries to the elderly, the sick and shut in. And also in the evenings when businesses were closed and they had oversized packages, they would sit them on their doorsteps, and I would jump out of his truck and run up to the doors and grab these packages. And also they would
It's
leave
Amazon
what
before Amazon.
exactly, exactly. So I saw business in action. My
Yeah.
grandfather employed his children, my aunts and uncles. They were, of course, adults at the time. My favorite place to help him clean, of course, was the candy store because, he was very careful about my taking certain pieces, and then he would leave whatever, the cost was on the cash register for the folks that came in the next day. But what really fostered my entrepreneurial ideas and approach was the fact that he would buy candy from this candy store and put a table outside of his home on the sidewalk and set it up for me to sell. So I took a carton. That was my cash register. I would cut it in half. The dollar bills were laid down on the flat part, and the coins were placed in the cradle where the eggs were placed. And so, every summer I spent doing this. And I probably started at the age of maybe 9 or 10 years old. As I got
Wow.
a little older, my grandfather would ship candy to me and I would continue to sell it. So I guess, those years really informed who I became.
Yeah.
And I learned many important lessons from him about being respectful and kind to people no matter what their station in life. And I saw that through his generosity. Back then, grocery stores could not sell like bread when it was past a certain date or dented cans. And so he would seek out very poor families and at his own expense, we would drive around town and he would donate these food items to these families. So, his truck had two doors that opened in the back, and I would be sitting in the back, and children would run up to us like bruised fruit, overripened bananas and things like that. And they would point out what they wanted, and I would place these things in the grocery bags and give it over to them. So, he had a very large family. He could have taken all of those food items and just given them to his own family, which of course they were provided some of those items as well. But he deliberately sought out poor people of all races, creeds, colors, and and donated items to them. So those lessons became the foundation for my business. And before establishing my business, my first was in '89, and then it has evolved to Gallery Myrtis. So that's why there's 30 years of experience in the arts. I knew very early on how I was going to approach business, my business. And the why the arts? Well, my father was an art collector.
Mm.
And so I was informed by this environment, the aesthetics of growing up and seeing original works of art in my home. Now, in terms of my education, I sought to become a CPA. I was very good at numbers. Something else I should mention about my grandfather was that although he provided a janitorial service to the movie theater, which was the main and the big movie theater downtown, he did their books. So he was basically their bookkeeper, accountant person. And I remember these huge ledgers that he would put on the tables, after sweeping the candy off the floor and the popcorn up, he would go up to the office and this little desk they had for him on the side, and he would take care of their books. Now, they didn't pay him for that service. He was still only paid for his janitorial duties, but I just remember the pride that he had in knowing that he was a very intelligent person, but because of race and discrimination, that he was only going to be allowed to excel to a certain level in that society, in that community. So back to my father, I'll digress for a moment, go back to my father. He was an art collector. And so, I grew up appreciating art and the beauty of it and the importance of it. But just by way of my background in business and assisting artists in developing their professional portfolios, that was really my entree into the art world.
I love it. I love it. First of all, thank you both for just the beautiful account of your entrepreneurship journey. And I think what I take away from both of you is just the powerful lessons and imagery that people can have upon young children that actually stays with you. You both, I didn't feel like y'all were talking about a story from a decade ago. It's like you're talking about something you saw yesterday, which is still inspiring you in your work that you're in today. So just thank you both for sharing just such personal stories and in your account. I'd love to ask you, so because this is a new business that I just don't even know how you start. And I know maybe other viewers don't know how you start. How did you build your business into being an art gallery? What were the steps that you went through? You don't have to talk about them in steps. Don't worry, I take notes. So just tell me, how did you go from idea, like this is what I want to do, to opening the door? So Selma, how did you do that? How did you start your business?
So for me, honestly, I had the idea, but it's like, putting it to action was that first step is actually the scariest, right? Like you're actually serious about starting a business. So I just soaked up a lot of information. I remember the first months as I was planning. So I did a lot of research online, and there's like a plethora of resources that are, accessible for everyone. But the Small Business Administration website, for instance, is a good starting point, and it can link you to a lot of free resources. One of them was called SCORE, which is a mentorship program that connects basically and matches mentors from your industry with a new business owner. So I actually took advantage of that program, and I was matched with a consultant that I worked with to kind of, exchange ideas, draft a business plan, learn from someone who's already done it before, what works and what doesn't work, even though he was from a different generation, but still, it was still helpful to kind of have that wisdom. And then kind of like creating like a game plan. So that was in one respect. In another direction, I also wanted to kind of test my idea before I was gonna, scale. So one of the things that I did was that I started by experimenting by going to pop-up markets and arts and crafts fairs. So the first maybe 2 years or so, I was just selling strictly through arts and crafts fairs, and that really helped me because I was meeting my customers and I was, actively listening to see what they liked and what they didn't like, right? So that helped me to kind of streamline and to kind of narrow down the list of offerings and products that I was selling. One example of that, for instance, is that a lot of people love the art, but someone will tell you, oh, I don't have space for that in my living room. So what am I going to do? So I started by actually creating a line where we were selling smaller accessories like, coasters and key rings and, fun little gifts. And those always sell out at every fair that I've sold at. So these are just some ideas. Yeah, but I think the first 2 years, just like, experimenting by going to these smaller markets and talking to the customers really helped me alongside working with my mentor.
I love it. I took down 8 steps you stated while you were going through. For those taking notes, 1, you talked about researching and planning at the outset. 2, great resource you just lifted up, the Small Business Administration, and particularly the SCORE program, which we've heard other entrepreneurs talk about, that mentorship, whether it comes through a formal program like SCORE or through mentorship, being really critical for you to 3, learn from someone who has done it before, even from a different generation. 4, developing your game plan. 5, testing your idea before scaling. We hear about that a lot with entrepreneurs, really going to the pop-ups and the arts and crafts fair. 6, you met your customers where they were and actively listened once you were there. 7, you streamlined what you would offer based on their feedback. So you actually had focus groups without having to do focus groups. And then 8, tailored your business, smaller accessories, so that people could fit the art, fit what you were selling. So you cater to different audience. Love the points you just made. And I know people watching are taking notes, but don't worry, I'm taking them notes for you. So I'm giving them to you, back to you in points. Myrtis, how about you? How did you start your business?
Well, I just take the non-conventional approach to everything. I'm a non-conformist outsider, so I don't know if what I'm going to share feels any script that you've heard before or a similar approach. But I began, again, with a background in business and marketing. I began helping artists create professional portfolios. So I began meeting with them. I was referred to, a friend referred several artists to me. And so with my business background, I was working for an organization at the time, but doing this on a very part-time basis and helping them to develop their resumes, biographies, and artist statements. And and that evolved. And then my business, when I established the business in '89, I was operating under Creative Artisans as an artist representative.
Mhm.
And that evolved from helping them to develop these professional portfolios to helping them to secure exhibitions in gallery spaces, which I started doing very successfully. So the word started to spread that Myrtis is representing artists, and um, and what I did was I filled a tremendous void. One,
Mhm.
artist didn't have anyone to go to develop those portfolios. And 2, they didn't have an advocate that would go in on their behalf, sit across the table from a gallerist and ask, if presenting that information before them, if they would consider um, taking this artist on, and that being just to include them in an exhibition. So that became very successful for me. And then the third thing that happened as the creative artisans business evolved was this interaction just came naturally with interested buyers.
Mhm.
So after doing that on a very part-time basis for about 10 years, and as uh, Selma has said, you start to show work at various like pop-up spaces and
Mhm.
some fairs. And I had the fortunate opportunity to start. form a relationship with a gallery in Washington, D.C. that at the time, it's no longer existing, but at the time was owned by a gentleman, Larry Harbin, who became a very dear friend and supporter. He's an attorney by profession. He invited me to come in and meet his clientele. And by invitation of, he said, look, you've been doing this for a number of years now. Come into my space. He owned this beautiful Italian Renaissance building at 509th Street Southeast and launch your gallery. You've been doing this for a very long time. You've built a clientele base. You're representing some really great artists. Start here. And so I did. And that is where Gallery Myrtis was born. It was there that I stepped outside of Creative Artisans and established my fine art gallery. While attending MICA, because once I realized that this was going to be a career for me, my profession, because again, I was going to be the CPA, I was in marketing and advertising. But once I realized that art was where my passion lied, I went back to school, took curatorial courses at MICA. Then it was not a graduate degree program. Now it is. So I took the courses at MICA to become to get the curatorial training. That was a life-altering experience because that was instrumental in moving my business to another level, to the understanding of presenting the artist's work in a way that put them into context, socially, politically, historically. And that was, again, critical to my business moving to the next critical phase of becoming a fine art gallery.
I love what you said. I took down 8 notes, 8 points. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. One, I love how you talked about that you began helping artists create their professional portfolio with all of their things. So you didn't start where you ended up, which is a beautiful thing to say. You don't have to start, be open to where things lead to.
Yes.
Second, you had a referral from a friend to help you with their resume, their biographies, their artist statements. Then you connected with Creative Artisans, which I love because you talk about like how you utilize that platform to become a creative artist rep. Third, this is the signature we hear from every entrepreneur, which is word of mouth is better than anything, any advertisement you can curate. So you became known as someone who understood the value of arts, an advocate for gallerists, and you filled that void. Fourth, you started, evolved into the business of purchasing, being a part of a buying, the buying is part of the industry. Fifth, you started showing pieces like Selma at pop-ups, others. I love the offer from your friend. What's his name again?
Larry Harbin.
Larry Hart, good man, because he gave you a platform, right, to start your gallery. And then 7, I think just word to the wise for all of us who may be wanting to be entrepreneurs, to go back and get the training to elevate. And to, maybe, I don't know if you did a full pause, but going to MICA being that critical curatorial training that allowed for you to accelerate your work into a fine art gallery. I love what both of you said. And let me tell everyone, I'm sorry, I've been engaged in this conversation. I see all of you putting your questions in the chat on Facebook. Thank you. Those who put in your questions in the chat on Zoom, I'm getting all of them. Those of you who are texting your questions in, remember the number is 22333. Type JHUWL in the message. I get all of those questions. I already see them coming through, but just wanted to lift up the text number so you have it today. This question came in on Facebook, which is, both of you talked about these pivots that you had in your entrepreneurship journey. What made you feel confident in taking those professional pivots that you had to take in order to be where you are today? So what instilled you in confidence? Were there like any signs of the road, like blinking lights being like, yes, go now, this is the time? Or how did you come to the point where you realized you should go left or right? Selma, what helped guide you, or what was fueling you as you made those pivots?
I think, every entrepreneur's journey is not going to mirror another's, right?
Yeah.
So, part of it is intuition, right? What feels right? What feels right? Always listen to like your inner voice. But apart from that, you don't want to make also emotional decisions. So that's why it's important to have your mentor, right? Whenever I had like a wild idea, I would kind of entertain it with my mentor. Like, what do you think if we do this or do that? And he helped, kind of like, it was like a shortcut instead of, taking some steps that would eventually cost you money and time and effort. It was nice to kind of know what could work and what could not. But also, believe it or not, I think the hardest part was the initial stages of launching the business. Once you've launched, and because I started small, it always was more comfortable to kind of scale things to my comfort level, right? It took me, I think, about 3 years or so to kind of make the decision that I wanted to open a brick and mortar gallery. When I felt like, okay, now I have enough interest, I have repeat customers, and I felt, also on the business side of things, like whether it was like regulation, all of these like compliance requirements, I was more comfortable taking it to that next level. So yeah, it's a science and an art, and there's not always like one right answer. You might just hit the jackpot one day, or take a hit and have to repivot.
Yeah, yeah. No, sometimes you get forced into the pivot. Sometimes you go into the pivot. But I love how you phrase it. There's no right or wrong. There'll be things that happen. Myrtis, what would you say on the same point?
Well, certainly Larry's invitation to launch my gallery in his space was instrumental in what led to Gallery Myrtis being here in Baltimore. I knew that I was going to only be in his building for like 2 years. He was planning on selling it, and but it allowed me to establish myself as a gallerist versus an artist representative, which is what I had been doing for a number of years. So that sent a clear message to people that my business has evolved and I've taken it to another level. I also was committed to do it because I realized not only the aesthetic beauty of art, but I understood the cultural relevance and also monetary value of it.
Yeah.
And art is an appreciable asset, which is why define myself as a fine art gallery, being in the asset class, and so that and also an emerging blue chip gallery that speaks to the artists that I represent and the direction of my gallery. So all the language around who I am in my business is very intentional and deliberate as it relates to where I have positioned myself and my gallery in the art industry. So it just, knowing, again, finding filling a void. There are very few fine art galleries, Black-owned galleries, women-owned galleries in this country. And so I knew I was filling a tremendous void. As Selma has said, that report, that article that came out, I think it's probably been in the last year or two, where it talked about the lack of art in collections by women and African and artists of color. So fortunately, with that information coming forth, my gallery has been one that has been sought after to fill those voids. So, what has been critical to that is, of course, being able to establish relationships with museum curators and major art collectors.
Excellent, excellent. One question someone asked was, what's the difference between blue and red chip? I don't think she said red. What did you say? Blue? Is there a red chip?
Blue chip,
too?
yeah.
So is there a red chip too?
Yes, there is. I
Oh,
just
so I
learned about that.
thought.
Yes,
Okay, so
yes.
what's the difference?
So I don't know a lot about red chip because it's a term that I've only recently heard about. But blue chip is artwork that is by a living artist or one that is passed on. So the gallery who represents those artists. So the artwork the artist has work in major art collections,
Mhm.
museums, and what also speaks to a blue chip status is that the work has been sold on the secondary market. So I deal in the primary market, which means artist purchase acquisition from gallery to the collector or institution.
Yeah.
Secondary market is that work is now being sold for the second time, and that could potentially be through an auction house.
I see. Wow. Wow. Okay. Wow. I mean, I'm just, as you can tell, a baby collector. Um, have you, if you looked around, you probably say she's not a baby collector. I have a lot of artwork in my office, but I so much to learn. One question that came through on, I think this was texted in, which is, what is the greatest piece of advice you've ever received about business or art or the art business? Selma, what's a piece of advice that you've received, the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
For me personally, I think the best piece of advice, which is actually my motto, is that I don't sell what I don't like.
Mm.
So if there's I have an artist who's trying to sell and he's, trying to use me as his outlet. If I don't like the art myself, I'm not going to sell it. And that can backfire sometimes because I've been in situations where I've had clients pick pieces and they were so dear to my heart. It was hard to let go. So yeah, this is my motto. If I don't like it, I'm not going to sell it.
That's good. That's I mean, we've had restaurant owners on here say, if I don't eat it, I won't sell it. So that's the same thing. How about you, Myrtis? What's the best piece of advice you've given about art business or the art business?
Well, I think the best piece of advice which has helped me in business is the words that were shared by my father, and that is to be fearless and not
Mm.
allow fear to get in the way of your success. And so I think with a lot of entrepreneurs, or I should say for myself personally, just grappling with that,
Yeah.
just, we have the responsibility, or I do as a gallerist, not only to, my staff, but to the artists whose careers I'm responsible for developing. And then there are opportunities like the one provided the invitation to participate in the Venice Biennale. The first thing I did was, there were moments of extreme joy and happiness. And then the fear set in. It's like, oh my God, I've never done this before. Do I even have the ability, the capacity to take this on? And so I immediately went to my mentors, who
Mhm.
are Doctors Leslie King Hammond, Laurie Stokes Sims, and who are preeminent scholars in the field of African American art, and also my former professor at MICA, George Sissel, and then a good client of mine, Arthur Lewis. So I formed a committee, and that's something else. As entrepreneurs, we often work in isolation, but
Yeah.
we need to have a support system. So I went to my committee, or I formed them, and I said, I need your expertise, your knowledge, and your experience to help me develop this exhibition that historically is so important. I'm one of few women of color who have ever participated in the Biennale as a curator or gallerist. And so, and this is part of my legacy. So I didn't want to screw it up. So I knew that I needed to go to individuals who would support this goal of mine and an opportunity. So again, just not allowing fear to get
Mhm.
in the way of grand opportunities. Just seek out the help, build a support system so that you can take those challenges on successfully.
I appreciate your candor and your honesty about the fact that, sometimes when the vision or the dream or the opportunity is so big that fear can have you count yourself out of what is what is yours,
Yes.
and what you rightfully deserve. And I know we have entrepreneurs come over here all the time that talk about like this big opportunity, which was a leap, and that they took it and realized that they were better for it. I know I butchered the name of that. I probably butchered the name.
That's okay.
But it's amazing that that opportunity was afforded you, and just speaks volumes about who you are and the work that you do. Let me ask this question that came in from a number of artists that are watching. So I want to make sure I'm going to get this question in for all of you, which is what they wrote. What is one piece of advice? And I'm combining your questions into one, but what is one piece of advice you recommend emerging up and coming artists to do to gain exposure and potentially get into galleries like yours, Selma, like yours, Myrtis, like to even think about red chip, blue chip, secondary market? What should they be doing now to gain that type of exposure, potentially get into galleries? Selma, what's your piece of advice to them?
I mean, I think you should ask the same questions that I asked myself before I started the business, which is what makes you different? What are you good at? What makes you different? What are you passionate about? And then secondly, what problem are you solving? Right? Because I found it very frustrating and quite unfortunate that, everyone, the saying is artists are very underpaid.
Mhm.
It's not a craft that you can make money out of, but this is where creativity lies, right? So as an
Mhm.
artist, you need to experiment and think outside the box. Don't do what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Try to pitch yourself differently. Try to create a niche market. Try to focus on something that no one else has done before. I came, into this without any much knowledge of the art gallery world, but I learned as I was taking steps. And there's nothing impossible. I mean, there's, like I said, there's a plethora of free resources and mentorship that is available. So seek it out, plan ahead, and it's not going to come between night and day. But you need to take action and to pivot, and to kind of meet the customers where they are, meet your market where it is. And I think you will see success. And I can attest to that because even through my journey, opportunities were actually coming to me at some point, right?
Yeah.
So you do take the first steps and you have to be intentional about it. But eventually you will see yourself gaining exposure, getting connections, even without any effort. You'll have a friend of a friend who will connect you with someone who's looking for that opportunity. And one
Yeah.
example of that, actually, last year during the COVID shutdown, my gallery was obviously, shut down because of the whole pandemic. But I had a Baltimore-based photographer, social justice activist, and a lecturer. His name is Dominic Molden,
Oh,
who,
yes.
you know him?
Yes.
Yes, he's someone who's very known in the Baltimore community.
Famous.
Yeah. So we actually did a virtual exhibit during COVID.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so he just saw the name of the gallery, and I don't think I even had a sign at that time, but he peeped through the windows, and he took down the address and looked me up online and reached out, and we connected, and we had a wonderful exhibit last year, even during COVID. It was virtual, but it was still a incredible opportunity and an
I
honor.
love it. I love it. I love it. Myrtis, how about you? What's a piece of advice you give to an up and coming new, artist that's watching to get into galleries or exhibitions or pop-ups?
Yes. So what suggest, and it goes in line, is very much in line with what Selma was saying. I love what she just stated. Essentially, as I've done with my gallery, I advise them to position yourself to be sought after. You have to
Mhm.
find your unique voice in your art. And for me, um, I don't represent hobbyists. So, an
Mm.
artist who is not seeking a professional career path is not someone that I'm seeking to represent,
Yeah.
because this is a profession for me.
Yeah.
So if you create on occasion, if you haven't created anything for several years, then you're not the right artist for me. So part of what I suggest to them is find the right gallery for you,
Mhm.
um, understand what their requirements are, uh, there is a certain protocol to approaching a gallery. Like if you drop by my gallery without an appointment, you will not be seen, because I can't just show up at your house and expect to be invited in. So I never see anyone who doesn't do that. The other thing is, like, it clearly states on my site the type of artwork that we represent here. But sometimes artists will call or try to set up an appointment, and that they don't know anything about the gallery. I'll say, well, what do you know about the gallery? Well, you're on Charles Street, but that's not enough. So you haven't done your homework, you haven't done your research, you don't know the type of art that we represent. And the other thing I suggest to them is to really take time to refine your techniques and pay attention to how you're finishing your art. I don't believe in perfectionism. You don't have to be a perfectionist, but I do require excellence. And so, I only put on my walls, because my reputation is at stake. So I only put on my walls work that I believe has been well executed, that the artist is telling a story. They've created a body of work that speaks to a narrative about, and the theme, the subject matter or materials can vary. But I'm expecting them to create a body of work that I can draw a line through and say, yes, I see where that is all connected. And I'm looking for compelling stories. So those are the types of things that I give consideration to when determining whether or not to take an artist on. And the majority of the artists that I represent do their art full time. So, this is how they pay their mortgage. This is how they care for their families. So that speaks to the price points by which the artwork is being sold at, and their commitment to their craft, that we are in business together. It is a partnership. We are it's a partnership, and we work in collaboration with one another. And I think that's also very key, a key point that, I wanted to share.
Absolutely. I have this question, and it builds off of what you both said, of sort of the journey of you with the artist, that there's also challenges associated with that. This question came in on Facebook, which was, what keeps you going despite the challenges? We know that the art industry may not have an ascent. It may have dips and lows and pivots. What keeps you going in spite of all of that? Selma, what keeps you going?
I mean, like Myrtis was saying, this is not a job for a hobbyist, right? If you're not passionate about it, if you don't want to put in the hard work, you're not going to see results, right? And there's going to be challenges if you're a new business, or even if you're an established business. The economy will go up and down, the industry will go up and down, and you have to be ready to face these challenges. So it's definitely something that, it's a mindset, right? You have to kind of expect the challenges. So you're able to deal with them with a positive mindset, with a positive attitude. But at the same time, being prepared as well, right? I always, take mental notes whenever I'm going to, and I visit galleries, whenever I travel. I kind of take mental notes of, like, this could be a good business idea. This could be a product that we could offer in the future. And I jot down all these notes, and I keep it, in the back burner. When the opportunity comes or the time comes, I can kind of scale my business or expand it. So, and then you always have to be also an agile business, in the sense that you have to adapt to the market, right? COVID happened. No one could have predicted that, and it shut down business. Does that mean we're going to stop selling? No, it was the time to kind of, buckle down and get the website up and running and updated, and try to sell through different outlets. Maybe even partner. One thing we had when I had the gallery in Fells Point, we had something called the Art Loop, which was a collaboration between all of the area galleries, where we did the third Thursday of every month in the evenings, we would open up all of our galleries. Because most galleries close at like 5 or 6 p.m., which is pretty early. But we had the third Thursday of every month where we opened our galleries to all of these groups who would visit. So also reach out to your neighboring galleries. We're not always in competition. We can always, and that was one of the shocking things for me when I opened my gallery. All of the area galleries were coming and introducing themselves, and they were happy. They were like, okay, this will be an area known for artwork, so more people attract more people who would want to shop in all these different galleries. So yeah,
that's so smart, because people's taste ebbs and flows. Like I've become I consume a different type of art now than I did even 10 years ago. And you're right, I might even do it like Tuesday might be a different art day than Thursday. So you never know, and you all together are so much stronger. So I love what you just said. Myrtis, how about you? What keeps you going despite the ebbs and flows of the business and the industry?
Well, I love it. Art has enriched my life in ways that I could have never imagined. I mean, it's what took me to Venice. It's what's taken me to 7 African countries. It's what's put me in the room of individuals, famous and infamous, you know. So I've the people that I've interacted with, my travels, all relate back to my involvement in the arts. Again, it's, there are ebbs and flows to any business. And I always say that art mirrors the ebbs and flows of the stock market. It goes up, it goes down. And during the height of COVID, we never closed our doors. Our pivot was that we stopped hosting programs in the gallery space, because part of what I believe is important is education. And so I was hosting over the course of many years programs under a series called Tea with Myrtis. And we would actually have formal tea set up and lectures and programs. We'd have authors and artist talks and arts professionals and lawyers come in to talk about subjects related to the art. And so, people were very disappointed that we stopped having those, because it just allowed for a more intimate setting and conversation around things art and culturally related.
That coming back to you with Myrtis.
Yeah, if we can, I hope to, because I really miss
I
it
would like to
also.
tell. I never heard about it till today, and I just got excited that I might
Yes,
be able to.
they're very popular and very much missed
I
by
think it
the
would be
community.
great. And I want the Thursday night gallery tour. I want both of those. I want both of it. So let me ask you both this question. We do have Oprah watching today. I'm so happy. Jackie confirmed it in the background. What's the advice you give for investors like Oprah who's watching, individuals who are smaller investors, individuals that just love art? How can we be supportive of you all? How can we make sure that galleries like yours continue to thrive? The statistic you gave at the beginning, Selma, was startling. And so there is work that we on the outside can do. So give us like 1 or 2 things, like action. Give us an assignment that you would say for us to do to ensure that galleries like yours thrive, survive, multiply. What's your advice?
I think the number one advice is never underestimate people. My gallery specifically and intentionally only is a platform for rising and mid-career artists. I don't work with established artists, especially the ones that I get from overseas. And that gives me great joy when I see someone who is so talented, but they just need a platform, right, to showcase their talent and to give, you give people joy when you give them a piece of art, right? So I'm almost very careful not to, judge or to undermine or to look down. You always want to give people space, and you'd be surprised at what hidden gems there are around us that are ignored, right? So for big investors and people who are well established, never underestimate the little people, because you never know. This might be the next big star.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I feel like people like get upset about being underestimated or small beginnings. Never look down on them, because that's when to get in. Because once it blows up, you're right. It's hard. Myrtis, what's your advice to Oprah and all of us watching on how we can be supportive and of you and your work?
Yeah, well, I think that the article that I appeared in the New York Times about the challenges that Black-owned gallerists face really is where I think people in the industry need the greatest help, and that is access and exposure. And what
Mm,
we need access to, and something that we hope will become an equal playing field, is to the major art fairs. Because we apply, but we're not accepted. And what those opportunities allow is the ability to present our artists before major collectors and major museum curators. We gain access into those networks, and those are critical to the sustainability of the gallerist, the business, and
mhm.
also in the growth of those artists' careers. I
Yeah.
used to represent Amy Sherrill.
Oh,
Yeah, and one of the things that Amy and I talked about in her frustration was the lack of exposure, and wanting to grow past, not be known, no, not be known as a local
yeah,
artist, but an international one. And
yeah.
so that happens through opportunities such as art fairs. That happens through opportunities of being written about by art critics and being published, and those having those articles in major magazines. So if there's any influence that the investors might have, and certainly we know Miss Winfrey, I would never call her by her first name because you're talking about, I just don't even feel like I've earned that right. But it
Yeah.
would be to help um, for galleries such as mine to gain exposure and access into those areas where that are so critical for us to be able to grow and sustain our businesses.
I love it. I love it. I think great advice for all of us, including Ms. Oprah Winfrey, on how we can be supportive and also think about the platforms and the levers that each of us have to pull, um, to really help the game. Let me make sure I do not miss this. We have 2 minutes left. We're going to be able to do this. Selma, give us all the ways we can get in contact, follow, visit you all. So tell us about that. Your website, your .coms, your ats. Give it all to us.
Absolutely. So obviously we are present online at fenzoul.com, FENZOUL.com. This is our website. I have an Instagram presence and a very premature Facebook presence, so don't visit Facebook yet, but do follow us on Instagram, follow the website. Also, the One Journey Festival is coming up next month. It's on June 25th at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. So please do come out. It's going to be over 5,000 people and a global marketplace. So you will see plenty of beautiful art from around the world. So be sure to stop by.
We will be there. Give us that again. Tell us what it is. Give us the date.
It's June 25th at the
Yep.
National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. It's the One Journey Festival, which celebrates and recognizes refugees and immigrants in this country.
Excellent. Love it. Love it. Myrtis, how can we get in contact with you? Where are you located? All those things.
Yes, well, the gallery is physically located at 2224 North Charles Street here in Baltimore, Maryland. We have a website at gallerymyrtis.com or .net. We have social media platforms on Facebook and Instagram, and certainly you can call at our number 410-235-3711. Uh, Up and coming exhibitions include the work of Ronald Jackson. We're going to be at Martha's Vineyard in February at Featherstone Arts Center, and in New York at the Print Fair in October. So lots of exciting exhibitions coming up.
Excellent. Excellent. So grateful to have both of you on Entrepreneurship Matters. This has been a dream for us and a pleasure for all watching. So just thank you, Myrtis. Thank you, Selma, for what you do and who you are, and more importantly, how you do it. Let me give us a little bit of announcements, and then we're going to wrap up. Next week, come back. This is another first for us, all about stationery, with Deonsa Ortiz of Wildry Lane and Ashley Coxum of the Paper Herald. You do not want to miss these two women who are leaders in the stationery business. I promise it is something you will want to write about. Follow us on JH Connects on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Email us feedback, jhconnects@jhu.edu. I want to thank our sponsors, Johns Hopkins University, Johns Hopkins Health System, the Mayor's Office of Small Women Minority-Owned Businesses, the Bloomberg Philanthropies, 10,000 Small Businesses, and as well as Hopkins Local. Thank you, Myrtis. Thank you, Selma. It has been a pleasure